We are live. Let's play the music. Do that ServiceNow dance. Good afternoon and welcome to TechNow live from Knowledge 16. Yay! We have our live audience. We are very excited to be here in Las Vegas this year. I'm going to pull that out of my ear because I don't need it anymore with all the technical challenges and whatnot that we have gone up to. Thank you for joining us. I am Chuck Tomasi, Platform Architect at ServiceNow, here to bring you technical tips and tricks for the system administrators and developers in your organization. And joining me is...
I'm Dave Slusher. I'm the developer evangelist in the platform group. And I'm losing my voice, as you can hear.
That's how I sounded yesterday. Lots of tea and lemon, buddy.
I need my flat, warm Coke. Ready to go.
So we are happy to bring this to you for the second year in a row. This week's topic is, well, we'll just bring up the PowerPoint. That's about all the headshot we're going to get. Do the old screen share thing.
Spare the users.
Spare the users. We'll share the entire screen. We're going to be talking about the Helsinki source control feature. You guys in the audience see the screen, right? Yay, okay. And what we're presenting on the screen is also being shared out. Didn't want you to see like two screens at once and one is too small. Drives me nuts when people do that. Helsinki source control, new feature in Helsinki that allows you to use a Git repository to send your information, your changes, your tables, your fields, your ACLs, your business rules, and save them. And then you can do revision control. So let's go to our thinking lady. I have a new idea for future episodes that I got to talk to you about. We may be replacing the thinking lady soon. She wants to manage multiple revisions in her dev instance so that when she's happily working through one of her sprints, halfway through. Craig, you want to join us? We're not mic'd. We're using so you'll hear. Are you going to stick around for the whole show?
Do I have to use my diaphragm?
That's between you and your friends.
So Craig was able to join us. You didn't get to see him on the webcam. But we are going to be doing revision control. So the use case, the scenario I've got is, pardon the background music. The use case I've got is Jenny, the developer, is working through her sprint. She's halfway through. She's got 35 of her 50 stories implemented on release. And production is on release 32. And they have an emergency to fix. What do you do?
Run?
No, you don't run. You don't want to promote your release 33 stuff into production prematurely. And you can't just like fix one thing and then export a mini update set. That's nonsense. You can use revision control, the source control with the Git integration to save your work, commit it to the repository, roll back to release 32, get exactly what's in production, fix that fix, move it forward, determine if you want to put it in the other branch. So we are going to be talking about the basics, some terminology, branching and tagging, conflict resolution, in case things run into each other, do a little demo for some of these, and then stashing. How do you move those changes from one release to the other?
Stashing. Nice.
Stashing. You like the stash?
Yeah.
Okay. So why do we build this? Main reason is because our customers are asking for it. We're positioning ourselves as a development platform, right?
Oh, absolutely.
We want people to get excited about building custom apps, right?
Right.
But if you have to do this crazy dance with update sets, that takes away from the productivity, the enjoyment of doing that. It just kind of gets to be a mess. So we've built an integration with Git. Questions we always get is, are there going to be other technologies supported in the future?
One of the questions you always get is...
Git? Yeah. Oh, I want to know what Git. Pick the name Git.
Oh.
That's a little humor for our British friends.
Right.
Anyway, well, Henry Brooks thought it was funny. The architecture looks something like this. You see that yellow box on the left? That yellow database water tank?
Right.
There it is.
Yep.
That represents our Git repository. We're going to connect that to our development instance only, not test, not prod. Dave, what happens if you use Git to promote things into prod?
As we have learned the hard way, that the way Git works is actually by every time you are accepting changes remotely, you're uninstalling one set of your application, and you're installing a new application from your Git repository, which implies you drop some tables.
Yeah,
And
rip and replace people.
we have learned the hard way that some chunk of your data may disappear as you do this.
That's nice.
Through trial and error, we have made the mistake so you don't have to.
You will hear that message iterated multiple times as we go. So connect only to development. When you need to move your changes for your release management process into test, into production, then you use the ServiceNow application repository. I know the word repository is overloaded here. We've used it twice, but you listen in context. When you're in development, making your incremental changes, doing your sprints, committing them, branching them, that's a Git repository. And I want to make sure this is clear, because I've already taught it twice this week, and probably a third time tomorrow morning.
That's right.
The application repository takes your changes en masse. You publish the application, and then it goes into test and into install. The way that works is still the way it's worked since Fuji, where we have an application repository in the cloud. I put my applications out there. I'm not interacting with other people's applications, but also the store applications are out there. So think of these as marked private or public. If it's public, it's part of the store. You can install it on any instance. If it's private, it's only my organization that can interact with those specific applications. And it does this through your customer code, et cetera, et cetera. So boring slide, I'm going to skip that. We already talked about that. There are some caveats you want to be aware of. I meant to animate this bullet by bullet, but we're going to go through it anyway. First of all, currently we're only supporting Git. No, I don't know what Microsoft's solution is to this. I haven't done a whole...
Visual Source Safe would be the Microsoft version.
Okay.
That's right.
You've got Mercurial, you've got Subversion, you've got various other flavors of this.
I can't speak with confidence what's on the roadmap, but I would assume we just wanted to get the lion's share and something that works with an easy API.
Yeah, Git would clearly be the plurality choice at this point in time.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I love Dave's vocabulary.
I know.
It may not be the majority, but it's more than anything else.
It does only work with scoped applications. Another incentive to use scoped applications. Tell us again about that rip and replace technology and remind us why this wouldn't work with with global applications, Dave.
You would potentially uninstall chunks of your global as you're updating
and cripple your instance.
Exactly.
As it's doing the rip part of the rip and replace. It does require Studio. That's our interface to Git. There's a source control menu that you'll see coming up in some of these screenshots and in the demo. And on-premise, some of our customers host ServiceNow on their instance, federal customers, large financial institutions that cannot they cannot host in the cloud. So we have a percentage of those, not many, that host on site. Can I use Git? The answer is all you need is an HTTPS connection to Git. It could even be hosted locally if you've got Git Enterprise or something of that effect. So,
the instance needs to be able to load that URL, whatever the networking situation is.
Correct. And it is an all or nothing commit. When I've got local changes on my dev instance, let's say I've changed a business rule, added 2 properties, modified my script include, I can't cherry pick and say, just send the 2 properties. It's everything. When you commit, it commits. Some people have commitment issues. You'll have to get along with that.
Right. This might be a kind of a conceptual shift. If you come from an application developer standpoint and you're used to being able to select, that is one of the value propositions of Git. When you're using it from command line or Eclipse or a tool like that, is that you can select which changes are going in any individual commit. With ServiceNow, that is not the case. As he said.
At this point in time, we could see changes in the future. And if you feel strongly about that, as always, let us know. Our developers and product managers are listening. Okay, we do store the credentials on the instance, and I want to make a point of this because currently Kreg, Dave, me, another couple of guys are working on a project, but I don't want to give Dave my credentials. My instance and my application interact with Git through my credentials. And when I say link this application to Git so that I commit and accept remote changes, I need to enter my Git credentials into ServiceNow. They are stored on the instance. Now we have it's possible to use multiple development instances. Dave's got his instance, Craig's got his instance. I don't want to give them my credentials, particularly because I use 2-factor authentication. I trust them as my friends, but I'm not that trusting.
See, who's the one with commitment issues?
Ha ha ha.
Right. So the point being that every one of us is using our own set of credentials to get our own instances talking to the repository, the Git repository.
And
so we're committing as ourselves.
We've configured Git to add us as collaborators. I might have initiated the repository, but I've added Dave, Kreg, Josh, Chris as collaborators to this project, so they can each use their own instance. So it is multi-instance friendly. However, if your organization only has one dev instance and you've got 15 developers, you're still using that one. Think of it like an integration account. I'm only talking to Active Directory through one account. So keep that in mind. Mid-server is currently not supported on Helsinki, possibly in the future, not saying which way or what release. Development outside of ServiceNow is not supported and highly not encouraged. And we'll tell you that in a second, how we keep track of that. Because as we commit these objects into the repository, we got to make sure that there's sanity checks going on.
And by not supported, Chuck means physically impossible.
I could upload
get to that.
Yeah, physically impossible. Here's our rip and replace bullet item, second from the bottom. Again, anytime you change branches, you change releases from 32 to 33, 33 to 34, it is going to uninstall your application files, tables, script includes business rules, UI actions, ACLs, the whole thing. It uninstalls that application. What happens when you delete a table?
The data goes away.
Data goes away. Right. It'd be nice if you could preserve that, but think about that logically. How would you save the data if the table changed or didn't exist in the release you were going to? Correct. Or the data structure changed in some way where 3 of the 7 fields were deleted and I added 4 more.
Well, you'd end up
now
with a bunch of garbage. And
you'd end up, I might even be changing a data type. It used to be a string, now it's a reference.
Right.
Right. There is no way to ensure data integrity across this. So there's no point in attempting it.
Right. And one thing we noted later in our testing, just before Helsinki was released, we were putting together the application creation course on Helsinki, which was delivered at Knowledge 16, getting old. And we discovered that before you publish, remember the diagram with the yellow Git on the left and the ServiceNow app repo? When I publish from dev to test, it does an implicit commit. So be aware of that. We weren't aware of that originally, and it caused our lab in the class to go a little crazy. So we had to reorder some steps.
Does that implicit commit, does it have like just a change of version from the previous one? Is it, as you're committing it, is it stamping with it a version that is now tagged as published version? Or
it says you have local changes. I need to commit those before I publish them to the ServiceNow app repo.
Is that even if you really don't? Or you're saying you did have them and then, so you did have, there were changes since that last version, and when you published it, okay. I didn't know if you're saying that even if there were no changes, there would be one more commit on top of that as part of publish.
I lost track. Let's move on.
All right.
It's been a long week.
Yes, I agree.
Someone forgot to tell me knowledge is a marathon, and I sprinted the first 2 days, and now I'm paying for it.
Yes, yeah, pace yourself, man.
So not going to dwell on this slide too much. How does it compare with team development? It is not a competitive product. It integrates, it's compatible, it's side by side. The main feature with team development is you can do your code and release reviews. You can enforce your application lifecycle. Git gives you that patchability and your release management capability. So those are the 2 main differences. Use your imagination on how these work. Very flexible stuff. The UI, I'm not going to dwell on this too much. I'd rather dive into a demo.
Just one really quick point, Chuck. So almost everything I've ever seen anybody talking about this, we use GitHub. It is not required that you use GitHub.
So you can use other services.
You can use any Git server that is accessible out there. Could be self-hosted, could be anything. You could stand up your own Git server that would work just as well, as long as it is accessible via HTTPS.
Wow,
we use GitHub because it's widely used. We all have accounts anyway, but it's not required.
In the training department, they use GitLab. Very easy to do. So I have a GitHub account here, simply called Knowledge User. I have no imagination, and I'm going to create a new repository. Like other things, I have to create this box within which ServiceNow can talk to. ServiceNow will not allow me to create a repository because I don't have any credentials, and part of that connection, which I'll show you, is tell me what repo and tell me what credentials. So I'm going to call this purple, I can't spell, purple tomato. All right. It's a test. Create the repository.
Oh boy.
And I'm given a few artifacts. First is the name of the repository. I'm going to copy and paste that because I need that for ServiceNow. I think we broke Dave.
Yeah.
Good thing he's not on camera right now.
Somebody else rented
Now
too.
I know his weak spot. That's all I need to do, really. That's about all the interaction I will ever have with GitHub. Let me jump to my ServiceNow instance, bring up Studio. Yeah, giggle again, how I get my shortcut to Studio. And I'm going to create an application. We'll create custom application. So we get the table, and we'll call this the purple tomato. I'm going to be really lazy. And create a table. Just typical development stuff. Purple fruits. We'll auto number it if we want. Okay, nothing fancy here. We've all been to sysadmin class making scoped applications. Says, are you sure you want to create it? Yes, I am. You got to do the sound effects every time. Edit the application. Studio comes up. Dun dun dun.
Very cool.
And it's already created my tables, a few ACLs. But notice a couple things up here in the upper right. There's my application name. There's the version 1.0.0. And I am unlinked. New to Helsinki, because source control is unlinked. Also new to Helsinki is the source control menu. I want to link to source control. Before I do that, I think I've only got one application, so the switch isn't going to do me much good. But I'll bring this up. Anytime you have multiple applications and you start Studio, it says, great, what do you want to work on? You've got 5 existing local applications. You can switch between those. This status on the left, that kind of looks like a hamburger.
Barbells to me.
I was
going to say hamburger with a toothpick. It's supposed to be like a plug and an outlet.
Gotcha.
They are currently not connected. I am not linked to source control.
Looks like parallel.
I also have the ability at this point, of course, to create a new application or import one from source control. Very handy. When Dave joins the project, I want him to import our existing repository full of tables and fields and ACLs to his instance. So he can import simply by giving his credentials and the URL. We've already got the repo out there. Now we're creating our local application. Let's link it. Let's close that barbell. We do that from source control, link to source control, paste the URL. Username was knowledge user. And the password, I'm not going to tell you.
Knowledge user.
And I give a commit message. Initial commit is always my favorite first
That's
commit.
right.
Like link to source control. And it puts the information out there. Now, I did say that creating the repo is about the only thing you're ever going to do in Git. But I'm going to take you there anyway, just to show you what's happened. If I reload that project,
There.
I have some artifacts. Dictionary elements like tables and fields are stored into the dictionary folder. Update contains business rules, client scripts, all the other artifacts that are not dictionary, including sample data. If you tick a few files on your list and say create application file, they will end up here. So you could tie some of that sample data rather than a rip and replace, put some demo data out there. And you can also define that demo data to be installed always, installed as demo data.
So
it
meshes very well with the rest of the system.
Yes,
Yeah, when you're
meshes
doing
very well.
Plugins or update sets or.
There's a README file out here, but since nobody reads me, rereads me, whatever, we publish it down here. Note the fact it says do not modify these outside of ServiceNow.
That is actually a very common question. One of the first questions you get is people say, does this mean that I can hook Eclipse to this Git repository?
Just another editor.
to
in
tweak
general.
my business rules.
Yes, exactly.
Well, first of
And
all,
you
that's
cannot.
hard because they're XML files.
Absolutely correct.
I wouldn't
They're-
edit XML.
Correct, and that's why it's not available. And so that checksum actually is will not match if you edit it. So what you will do if you do that is you will break this project.
I got you. Okay.
You'll make it invalid.
It compares it against the checksum file. So if the artifacts in this repository don't match the checksum, ServiceNow is going to, next time it connects, is saying, it's broke. I'm not touching it.
Like all checksums, what it's really doing is protecting itself from invalid or corrupted data. In this case, you would be the human, would have corrupted the data yourself from the perspective of the
It wouldn't
system.
be my first time.
You got it. So now if we do a switch or just take a look at that list, our connector is plugged back in. Hallelujah. Things work great. So let's say I'm happily working along and I create a new application file. Let's create a secondary table. We've got the purple table. What do you think the next table is called?
Fuchsia.
Tomatoes.
Wow.
Fuchsia. Good guess.
Good guess. We're not going to extend anything, but we'll put it under the purple menu. What was my other menu called? Let's find out.
Tomato.
Application
Called
menu is
tomato.
tomato. Okay.
Yeah.
Tomato. Thank goodness for Studio. It tells you everything you need to know. And you don't have to guess. We'll create a new column in there called name, color. All right, we're just building an application like we
Shape.
normally would on a Saturday night.
Mm-hmm.
You don't. Your
Saturday
Saturday
night.
nights are different than my Saturday nights, I guess. And there we are. Now, if we look at, if we ever were to come back into Studio, we see this little blue arrow. It says, you have local changes. It differs from the hub, from the repo,
Right.
which may in fact be a good thing. You may just be fooling around on a sandbox machine. That's another thing I like about multi-instance capability. I've recently taken a lot of my applications and stored them in Git. Now I could be teaching a class and say, hey class, look at this. Link to my repo, boom, I've got everything installed. I'm not hauling around update sets. I'm not trying to use Box or Dropbox or something to save my versions. It's always there. And I love it. Okay, so what do I do if I've got local changes? Well, eventually I want to get to the end of my sprint or whenever it's convenient and commit them. It says, here is what you've changed. Yep, there's a few changes in there. And I say,
Second post.
yeah, V1. Really annoying. I have bad comments. Good practice might be, since all of these accounts, all these developers are using the same Git account, if you were to ever go over, if you were to ever go over to Git and say, tell me about the changes in here, the comments, it's all on the same account. You can't see who changed it because it's always the same who. You could put name, date, initials, whatever you want in the comments to help you document who's been changing what.
Okay.
Okay, just a side note, that came up as one of the questions in the lab yesterday. Now let's say I'm ready for release. I'm just going to skip this. You know what? No, I don't want to skip the slides because they have a really cool animation that I worked really hard on.
Good. You don't want to waste that.
So we talked about that. There's our menu. That's the magic that happens. We talked about that. We gave the demo. Now let's talk about branching and tagging. We've got to the end of our development cycle. It's time to release this into production. We use the publish and install through the ServiceNow application repo to get there. And we want to put a mark in the sand. We want to put a line on that sidewalk and say, this is where release 1 happened.
Right.
Everything after this point is going to be release 2. What do? You use branches and tags. Okay? This is my really cool animation that tells the story about animations. Think of the development cycle in the old days as a timeline. And your master branch represents the traditional timeline development. I develop A on Saturday, I develop B on Sunday, I develop C and D on Monday, and then I made an update set and released it, and life goes on. Okay, so that doesn't change too much.
Right. Right.
What we can do is use a tag, which is an immutable object. Doesn't mean you can turn the volume off. It means you can't change it. You can't mutation, no mutation. You put a marker. It's just a label, a tag that you stick on this timeline and say, here's when event happened. I may or may not want to do something with that, but it's just a marker. If you don't put a marker there, there's nothing to come back to. They are very handy for just maybe the end of the sprint. because later I can come back and take one of those tags and make a branch.
Right.
Now, all of those blue objects, business rules, client scripts, ACL script includes, all of that development is copied onto the release 1. So if I make changes to the R1 branch, they don't impact anything in the past or anything in the future of the master branch.
It's an alternate timeline.
It's an alternate timeline, yes, where Kreg has a goatee.
That's right.
I'll add that to the development cycle. Now I can add a green document. Maybe it's a new UI action. Make the decision. Does that need to come back to the master branch? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's a bug fix. Maybe
you're just testing something else.
Maybe you're testing something out. Maybe you're adding a feature that somebody wants to throw away. Now we continue as we move from left to right on our timeline. We've created 3 new objects on the master branch. The green object is not available. If you switch back to the master branch, it knows nothing about that green object. Maybe it was a property.
Now this could be an example of where it might rip a table out if you switch back and forth.
When you switch back, it's going to rip that table out. These 3 grayish, blackish, or very dark blue documents are also not visible to release 1.
They're redacted.
Yep. You can create a branch that is not from a tag. It's your choice. But you cannot create a tag after the fact. I can't go back and create a tag on right where that R2 is. But I could go back and create a new branch from tag A.
Right.
So tags they're just little sticks in the walk
Yeah,
of
they're
life.
little signposts.
Little signposts. That's the word I was
Fork in
looking
the
for.
road. There you go.
No, the branch is a fork in the road.
All right. Yes. Okay.
The tag is where you could
Think
put
of the
a fork.
tags as mile markers.
Yeah. And then our development goes on. I'm making changes on the master branch. I'm making changes on the release branch. Some of these changes I may want to pull over. And I think in the interest of time, we'll do the yes, you can do branches off of branches. So if I've got a release 1 and I need to make a release 1.1 that is independent of everything else, I can do that. But you can get a little wound around the axle. However simple or complex your release management system is, we can facilitate that.
When you do that, what you have done is you're now you're got an exponential possibility of conflicts as you bring it back in, because you have
Right.
multiple branches varying independently, all of which can result in a conflict when they come back to a different branch.
Yeah. But it may be valuable if you need to backport some releases.
It can have uses. It's just
Yep.
it comes at a cost.
Exactly. To create a tag, I'm going to demo this again. This is probably the shortest demo I will do. It was the shortest lab in class.
Maybe the most interesting.
Maybe. So I have finished my development cycle. I've created all these wonderful tables and ACLs and who knows whatever else. I'm going to create a tag. Source control, create tag. And it says, great, what do you want to name it? I'm going to call this one Dave. It sends that off to the repo, and now it has a record of that tag. What does that mean? What has it actually done? Not much at this point.
It's basically added one bit of metadata to that commit.
Yep.
Which is that commit has the value of Dave.
And now I'm going to create a branch, and I'll call this branch
My land.
Dave Release 1. I can use the Dave tag as a marker, but I don't necessarily have to, as we saw on that previous diagram. Could be on a tag, could be not necessarily.
And if you don't specify the tag, you're branching from current point. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. So if you've got multiple developers, communicate, work closely. You should already be doing that anyway when it comes time to release. A good change management. Oh, no.
It's invalid.
You know why?
You had a space.
I had a space in there. No spaces. Numbers are fine. Let's go back. Yeah. Okay. Let's fix that bug. I mean, ID 10T error.
And I believe that the reason, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the reason why that's invalid is because ultimately that corresponds to an URL.
I think you're right. Although,
Yeah.
you'd think URI encoding would address that.
Right. It doesn't automatically
you don't want a
percent 20 in the middle of your.
I would say you don't want
that is the reason for that validation.
Good idea. So numbers, letters, underscores,
that. Space is bad.
dashes, possibly, you're safe. So now I have a branch, and it is also switched to that branch. pay attention to this upper corner. If I want to get back to, well, let's make a change on that branch. Just to show an example, we'll create a property, system property, create, and we'll call this, in our purple tomato, we'll have a vine property. Color of the vine. We'll leave it as a string and we'll say the vines are red. We have purple tomatoes and red vines. Life is good.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah.
I am now, think back to that diagram. I'm now putting that green document. Oh, I am all over the place with colors today. On the R1 branch that does not exist on the master. How do you know? Well, what happen if I go to switch branches? It goes, hey, wait a minute. You've got local changes. What do you want to do with them? You're about to switch. We're about to do a rip and replace that could have an impact on your work. Maybe that property was just a lark. I can discard the changes and go back to the master branch, leave everything off of the R1 branch that I've created locally, or I could stash them. This is like putting it in my back pocket. It's not a dime bag, not that kind of stash.
Okay.
I don't know what you're talking about.
No, yeah.
I have no idea.
Okay. And it says, what branch do you want to go to? I'm currently on the R1 branch. That's why the button hasn't lit up. This is switch branch. It's like being on the 3rd floor of the elevator and pushing the 3 button.
Yeah.
Not going to happen. I've done that. See, we're protecting myself from myself. I switch back to this branch. I said I want to stash those changes, right? I didn't toss them out. So that property is safe. It's not committed. It's not in the repo anywhere. I didn't commit it, but it's protected. Now I'm back on the master branch, as I can see from up here. So pay attention to what branch you're on. Do you see a property in here?
I do not.
You do not. Maybe I want to apply that property to the master branch and think not just one property, this could be 50 changes. How do I get that on there? I can apply, I can manage the stash and apply it. So I could apply it to the master branch. This is where patching from branch to branch comes in handy. Create your fix on one branch and then apply it to the other branches. So let's apply that to the master branch. I know, I created it on R1. Ooh, what's up with that? And then I applied to master, but it didn't really get committed. So where do you think that stash goes?
Away.
I've stumped them.
I'm going to guess the stash lives on, unless you explicitly make it go away.
That is correct.
That was a sheer guess.
Manage stashes, I still have a stash because I may want to apply that stash to multiple branches. This needs to be fixed in 1.1, 1.1.1, and the master. Everybody's got to stay in sync with whatever this fix is. We'll talk more about stashes in a bit. What do you think happens if I rip and replace and go back to the Dave R1 branch? Property or no property?
Property.
Property.
I say no property.
You're probably right.
I never committed it.
Well, you did make the demo.
Huh?
That's
You did
correct.
make the demo.
That's
so-
correct. He stashed it from that, but did not. There's nothing persistent in the state of the
Right.
application of that.
I did a rip and replace. The only way it's
Okay.
sticking around is because it's in a stash.
Okay.
It never was committed to R1. Once you make a commit, there's no more local changes, right? You can't make a stash after a commit. We'll get into that in a picture too. Look,
So
Mom,
essentially,
no problem.
the way to think about it is that stash is basically the role of a patch.
Yeah.
In your, if you were a desktop developer,
Right, that's what I was
a
thinking
stash
of,
is a
yeah.
patch, more or less.
Yep. Okay, no property. We good with branches and tags? Pretty
Yes.
simple,
Yeah,
complex.
that's
That was actually twice as long as the lab took the students. It was pathetic. So, once again, rip and replace. When you switch, and I didn't put any demo data in here, it would have been futile and waste of our time, but it all goes away because the tables go away. If you do this, remember that larger apps, if you've got 500 changes, which is not uncommon for a moderate size application, once you count up all the ACLs, once you count up all the business rules and client scripts that you developed, it could take a while to recreate all that information. And if you don't manage the stash properly, you could lose your local changes Because again, rip and replace. If I added that property and I say, hey, let's switch branches, you got to watch that little radio button on the bottom. We did the demo. Now let's talk about conflict resolution. Dave, Craig, and I, this is for multiple instances, and I don't have multiple set up here, so I'm just going to have to show you screenshots.
Okay.
But imagine Dave, Craig, Chuck, we're all working on our maybe forthcoming to-do application. I've made some changes, and I've committed them. Well, I'll do this with a diagram, okay? Here's Craig. This is Craig's instance. Craig's instance talks to Git. Okay. We all good so far?
Yep.
Here's Dave. Dave's instance also talks to Git. We've got the collaboration thing down. We're using our credentials. Everybody's happy. Craig creates a business rule. Craig commits the changes. There is now a copy in Git. Not too complex so far. All right? Dave pulls that down, and he wants to use that, test that as part of his application. Now Craig goes and updates it and commits it again. So Dave is lagging behind in the changes. But he says, I made a fix too. Maybe it's different than Craig's. Maybe it's the same as Craig's, but it's going to be different. That record has a different sys updated time, unless you guys are like saying ready, set, go on the enter key.
You're right.
Which isn't going to happen.
We do that all the time.
When Dave tries to commit, it goes just like I saw before. You've got differences. It's different than what's in the repo. We need to resolve this. And just like you saw before, same kind of thing where you've got two choices. Junk it or stash it. And if you stash it, then you can pull down Craig's green one. That wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was the alliteration going on. Pull down Craig's green one and then decide what to do. You can do a line-by-line comparison of the code. You can do a field-by-field comparison, just like we've seen with update sets and system updates. So you go and commit the changes. It looks a lot like this. I'm about to do a commit. It says, you can't commit your sample business rule here because things have changed. What do you want to do? Same screen we saw before. Stash it or junk it. Then once the conflict is resolved, you've pulled all the changes down from the repo for Craig's latest updates. It says, what would you like to do with these artifacts that we had before? We stashed them temporarily. Now, do we want to apply them? Do we want to delete them? And this you can cherry pick. Mm-hmm. You can pick these one at a time. You can't do it on a commit.
And this is a familiar concept to anybody, again, who has done desktop resolution of Git commits, right? You don't resolve the conflict on the external repo. You resolve them in your local copy of things. Right. You pull it down, and then the conflict message exists in your local file. It is your responsibility to fix it before it can be recommitted. So it's very analogous to that.
Final topic, easy to do, stashing. Again, not mustache. This is just a visual cue to us, not drug dealing. They're used for two main use cases. Nobody's laughing at that one anyway.
I'm not.
We'll go back to misspellings that make Dave laugh. We can either keep a copy of our local changes. Maybe we're just experimenting and we need to keep a copy of those when we switch branches before we commit. Maybe we want to use it as a patch to another branch. Mm-hmm. Those are the two main use cases. You may be able to find uses for others that I haven't thought of. This one's even simpler. Again, we're back to a single developer instance and Git. Craig creates a file, we'll say a business rule, client script, ACL, whatever, and commits it. We're all on the same page?
Yep.
So far, so good. He then creates two more artifacts on the release one branch. Okay, those other ones were done on the master and commit. Now he's created a new branch. He's created them on the branch. He wants to apply these to the master branch. So he's up on that top tier looking to put it on the master branch. So every release after that has this patch. Creates a stash and manually puts the local changes into the stash. All the local changes. This is just like a commit. Can't pick and choose. Whatever's local is going in that stash. Then he applies it to his R1 branch. Now you do the commit. What if I flip those two steps around and he committed first? There's no local changes with which to create a stash. You can only create a stash with local changes. Okay. So flip. I've done this before. I've hit commit and went, oh, Oh,
Yeah.
then it gets painful. You have to do the old export XML of this record and export XML of that record. Well, if you've got 150 ACLs, God bless you. It's going to be tough to make a stash again. So you've applied this to the R1 branch. What happens when you change to the master branch?
It's not there.
It's not there. You switch branch to master, all we had was the gray first artifact that we created in step 1. So final step, apply the stash and commit so it's on both. That's my visual about stashing your changes. Very simple example, but it kind of illustrates what's going on.
I think you broke our budget getting that animation.
I'm getting really good with PowerPoint animations. Again, you can't create stashes after the commit. Only the local changes and all of the local changes. So use them judiciously. When you go to create a stash, it says, here they are. Let's put them in the stash. Source control, stash local changes. And I really wish there was some sort of name or human readable description field on this, because when you get 4 or 5 stashes, it gets a little messy. You have to go by the date they were created, and that's sad. So I am talking with the developers. We'll see if we can get that into a future release. The other thing is, where was I going with this? How long is that stash going to hang around? I've applied it to R1. I've applied it to the master branch.
My guess is forever unless you go and delete it.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
See where it says apply? Next to it says delete. That's how you get rid of stashes. So once you've determined that you've applied them everywhere you need to, you delete them. Clean them up. Quickly, some best practices. Unless I think of more, we are winding down. We're close. This is for dev instances only, so we don't pull a Dave.
Yeah, right.
I don't really want to have this best practice named after me.
Yeah, don't pull a Dave. A Dave instance.
You don't ever want a best practice named after you.
Or a wiki article.
or a rule or a law.
That's
A rule,
yeah.
yeah. The Dave.
The Dave rule. The Dave operator.
Okay. If you want, you can include demo data as application files.
Mhm.
I didn't give a demonstration of that, but I think we're all pretty clear. You get a list, check, 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 go down to the list UI actions and say create application file. It becomes part of that application. And then and it says, wait, do you want to make this demo data that they can choose or force it to be up? There's use cases for either way. If I've set up maybe a table full of numbers, that may be something I need to get to production. But I also want to make sure that it's always there as I'm switching branches. It's part of the application.
You almost certainly want to have some sample data in your dev instance, and you don't want to have to recreate it from scratch every time you deal with your changes.
Right. It doesn't have to be the 15 million incidents that exist in production, which is what happens after a clone, but you do want to have some. As we stated earlier, only through ServiceNow and only through ServiceNow. Do not change the files on Git. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. My favorite from the sales department, it comes free.
It's included.
It's all there. So developers can get revved up. For reference information, Dave's favorite site,
developer.servicenow.com.
I half expected him to say the thing about I do not speak for my employer.
Yeah.
I am speaking with it.
Yeah.
This is the time when it happens.
We got it programmed in from his regular podcast that we've been listening to for 12 years.
That's right.
There's lots of great information on the community for information and links. Of course, YouTube has some videos. We'll be posting this to YouTube as well. And other public information.
Well, our docs are very widely available. So,
Right.
Yeah.
So your takeaway, Source Control offers you improved management of your application through release management, allows developers to be more flexible in how they can move between releases. Oh, if I have a single developer instance and I have 4 developers on there and I switch branch, tell your other developers. Please. This came up in class, not that it was a problem, but it was a thought that you should already have a mature enough change management process to say, we are all going back to release 33 today to fix the bug that was spotted in production. So don't make anything new. We're going to stash all the changes that are pending release 34.
Would it be fair to say that this was intended primarily for use as multiple instances, like multiple users developing on the same account, all using source code to the same repository. Is that an edge case? Is that?
I think it's definitely not the majority, but it's capable of doing that.
It is capable. Okay.
Quite capable.
Okay.
Again, the links you've all seen and before. You know what one slide is missing?
Thank you.
Nope.
K17.
Yes. K17, which is going to be in Orlando, Florida, May 7th next year. I just thought of that. I hid that slide because I didn't know the information while I was making
It doesn't
this guy.
conflict with my anniversary.
That's good. So we look forward to seeing you all there. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to flip back to the video real quick, unshare the screen. We got to do our closing parting shot, which hopefully won't look like President Nixon signing off from
bring
the...
it in.
We're all gonna walk.
Thank you, everybody.
Hey.
And we look forward to seeing you at Knowledge 17. Bye.
Hi, y'all.